Tell us when.
Would
you like it to play some eyeballs on them?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Declare the meeting open. And before I commence, tonight is the first night that we officially live stream. So we have a 4-hour window of opportunity to complete this meeting, otherwise our time on Facebook is expired. So you are all part of history making. Now, as part of the new procedure, I am required to read out the following. This meeting is recorded and live streamed for public viewing via the internet in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice, with the recorded stored and made available in public for later viewing. The recording is subject to copyright. Members of the public attending or speaking at this meeting will be recorded and publicly broadcast. By attending this meeting, you voluntarily consent to your attendance and participation being recorded. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed session will not be live streamed. Council requests that everyone present is respectful and uses appropriate language. Council does not accept liability for any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Please ensure that all electronic devices, including mobile phones, are switched to silent or off, and under the Code of Meeting Practice, public recording of this meeting is prohibited without prior authorisation by Council. I'll also do the acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are meeting on today and pay my respects to elders both past and present, and also pass that respect on to any Torres Strait or Aboriginal people present tonight. And if we open, and again, Reverend Gavin Perkins will also be the first Reverend to open the meeting under Civic Prayer live stream. Reverend?
Well, let me lead us in prayer and the many thousands watching online. Let's pray. Almighty God, we humbly ask that you might grant your special blessing to this council this afternoon. We ask that you would be pleased to direct and prosper the work of your servants to the advancement of your glory and to the true welfare of the people of the Southern Highlands. Thank you on behalf of all of those who have gathered here today and online. Thank you for many and abundant blessings. Thank you for the beauty of the Southern Highlands, for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfil our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honour of bearing appropriate responsibilities. We pray for our Mayor, for the council officials and this assembled council. Graciously grant those gathered today wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, and give them the ability to work together in harmony even when there is open and honest disagreement. Also give those gathered here today peace in their own lives and a joy in their task. We pray for the agenda set before the council. In all their responsibilities, enable those gathered here to use their authority to serve all. It's in the most blessed name of our Lord Jesus Christ that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you. Apologies? No apologies. Adoption of previous minutes of council meeting held on the 12th of June. Somebody would like to move that way?
There's a correction there, Mr. Mayor.
Move Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Markwart. Correction.
I assume this is the appropriate time to bring it up now,
As long
Mr.
as
Mayor.
it's a correction.
Yes, under the new meeting procedure. And it's on page... just bear with me. Page 7 of the minutes, Mr. Mayor. And it says under 9, public forum, the Deputy Mayor Turlin left the chambers and came back. That is actually myself that left the chamber and came back. because it
Thank
was
you.
in relation to the item that was straight after that.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. That will be noted to correct the minutes. Any other correction of minutes? Then I put it all in favour. Those against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Any councillor with declaration of interest? Councillor Turland.
14.1 legal items. It's less than significant, as it's only to be noted.
Thank you. Noted from Councillor Turland. Mayoral minute, there isn't any, and we don't have any public forum today, so we move on to visitor item, and Mr George Altamont will address council on behalf of the applicants, and that is 10.1. So what we'll do, as to speed this up, we will ask you to come up and address council. You do? George. Now, sit yourself down, sir. And just before you commence, there is a different code of meeting practice, which you are also the first participant on as a member of the public. We used to have, you are limited to 3 minutes without any extension. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to address this council. My name is George Altamont, and I've been asked to speak on behalf of my sister and brother-in-law Bruno and Mafalda Robio, who are the owners of the Garden World site. I'd just like to give you a brief history of the application. The DA was first lodged in August 2011, which is nearing 8 years ago. On the 25th of November 2013, Council provided the owners with a copy of a draft set of consent conditions on the basis that the DA had been assessed as being acceptable and should be approved. However, for reasons that remain unanswered, the DA was never finally determined, and here we are in 2019, still waiting for an approval. In early 2016, Council requested the owners enter into a voluntary planning agreement to secure funding land and carrying out of the works for the drainage, the land dedication along the creek line and other infrastructure works. It then took a further 12 months to prepare the VPA at considerable cost to the owners, having to engage lawyers and other consultants to help them. On the 28th of August 2016, the owners agreed to the term of the VPA and notified Council accordingly, thereby expecting to receive an approval. That never happened. The VPA was subsequently publicly exhibited on the early 2017, to which Council received 2 submissions on behalf of the adjoining property owners. Following receipt of these 2 submissions, Council officers advised the owners the VPA would no longer be agreed to and will be replaced by a works-in-kind agreement. This was a major setback to the owners after waiting nearly 7 years for an approval and having agreed to Council to request to enter into this VPA. In January 2018, Council officers addressed the owners the DA could be approved contingent upon a deferred commencement condition ensuring the extension of Isdale Road across the neighbouring Nati Ponds development to connect through to Garden World site, which is the site in question. A further 10 months passed without an approval. In December 2018, the owners engaged the service of a new team of consultants in town planning, heritage, landscaping and engineering to address any additional matters Council had in order to have the DA finalised and approved.
That is...
I won't be
your
long,
time.
it's just finish off.
I'm sorry, sir, there is no extension of time. That is the new, I accept that. What we adopted last week says that speakers are limited to 3 minutes duration. No extension of time will be granted. There is no extension of time. Thank you, George.
I was just going to thank you anyway, so
Well, but you can stay.
Can I stay for that?
Yeah, you can stay for that, and I take being thanked any time of the week. But each councillor can ask you a question if you wish,
yeah, sure.
and their time is limited to 1 hour. 1 minute. It seemed 1 minute can
And I only
seem
get
like
3
an hour.
minutes.
Yes, that's right.
You're
Councillor
very short.
Tell.
So you're happy with the proposal at the moment? It's a layout, the DA that you've got in front of you right now?
Yes,
It's
the
time-
last, I was about to finish off, but in the last 5 months, we've done a considerable amount of work with council officers, and I've got to say, the council officers that did this work have done a very, very good job with our town planner.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we're happy with those conditions. I've been through them, or we've all been through them, and we're very happy with them.
So the change between the VPA and then the work in kind and all those delays have obviously frustrated the process to date.
Yeah, and it's been a hell of a long time. And I think, really, to be frank, it's probably, a bit of fault on both sides.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councillor Markwood.
Thank you very much. My question is quite a simple one. Is there anything further you think the council should be informed of? Thank you.
What was the question?
Is there anything else the councillors should be informed of?
No, not really. Just if you'd like to ask me any questions.
Yes, Councillor Nelson, and I go back to you, Councillor Markwood.
It was a Dorothy Dix question to give you a 1 minute extension.
Councillor Nelson. Councillor
okay.
McLaughlin.
Thank you, sir. Look, with the delays, they are unfortunate. Was some of that due to the problems with the neighbour and the other development rather than necessarily with council? I get the feeling that there might have been a bit of conflict there between the other development. Is that correct?
Look, I've only been involved in trying to get this resolved in the last 6 months, to be very honest with you. I don't really think so. I think that it was probably, not handled well on both sides, to be very frank, as I said. And in the last 6 months, with the help of the council officer, particularly Ross Jordley, we were able to get it to this point.
I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Yes, I take it that you've driven around Natai Ponds at all?
What's that again?
You've driven around the subdivision of Natai Ponds, which
The
is adjacent
next
to
subdivision
this
down.
development?
Yeah, we're actually next door to that, I was, yes.
Well, my concern is the road widths, and I was wondering whether you'd think that the road widths of this new subdivision could be widened at all.
You mean the exit road?
I would think he's meaning the internals.
The internals.
Yeah, well, probably the road that would take the most traffic is the one that actually goes through the adjoining neighbouring property. And I believe that has been engineered to take that extra traffic.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Alfonte. I've got some thoughts about tree coverage on the subdivisions, particularly the smaller blocks.
Can you talk we're live streaming. You'll have to try and all talk into your microphones, please.
Following the previous instructions. But my question to you, sir, is I'm going to put forward a small alteration here today for a deferred condition relating to increased small plantings on the blocks, particularly the small ones. Have you got any thoughts on that? It's about shade and heat load and so on.
I think that, the plan was drawn up quite some time ago. I'm not quite sure whether the market's moved, because we're talking about these plans being drawn up 8 years ago. probably once we get to having a closer look at it, it may have to change. And, we would naturally do it by, I suppose, a Section 96, which has got another number now, but I know it as a Section 96.
Thank you.
Thank you. No more further questions? Thank you, George.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I would think this development, as has been pointed out, has been on the book since 2016 virtually, and subdivisions do take a large amount of time. An introduction from council staff and then questions too. Mr. Wilton, through you, General Manager.
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to consider DA 110767, which seeks development consent for the purpose of a 131 lot subdivision at 61 Old Hume Highway, Mittagong. The proposal was lodged with Council in 2011 and has been hampered as a result of complexities surrounding the Narrow Ponds Voluntary Planning Agreement, which was prepared as part of the master plan for the Garden World site and also the Narrow Ponds subdivision. The voluntary planning agreement has since been abandoned, and the applicant is now seeking the development to be determined in the absence of that agreement being in place. In 2008, the site was part of the wider Northern Gateway strategy, which was in 2011 rezoned the site from RU4 to R2 low density residential, and also incorporated E3 environmental management under the Wingecarribee local environment plan. There was a 450 square metre minimum lot size that was applied to the R2 zone. The merits of the proposal include the creation of 129 lots over 4 stages and the creation of open space, riparian zones, and also a commercial site known as Braemar Garden World. The subdivision will also preserve the Kamilaroi heritage site, which is adjacent to the Old Hume Highway. Access and egress arrangements to the site are being proposed by a left-out only arrangement to the Old Hume Highway, and will also require the formalisation of Iredale Road through stage 4 of the Narrow Ponds development. The subject site is flood prone and forms part of the wider Narrow floodplain management study. The proposal has been assessed in accordance with the outcomes of that report and will not decrease floodplain storage or change the behaviour. The proposal was notified for a period of 4 weeks in September and October of 2011. 4 submissions were received during that period. Those submissions detailed lot sizes, increased traffic, social and environmental impacts, and also flooding. And responses to those submissions have been provided on pages 17 and 18 of the report this evening. On assessment of the proposal, the report has recommended approval, subject to deferred commencement conditions relating to access, landscaping, and also sewer modelling.
Okay, questions, Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Madam GM. You mentioned, Mr. Wilton, flooding. Now, there have been some issues raised, not only in terms of volume of water, but also pollution of the creek. Could you tell me how we're going to deal with, builders' waste that might be deposited in that unnamed creek and continues downstream? That's been covered in the conditions of consent, has it? Through
the Chair, there is a tributary which goes into basically 3 detention basins on the site. Once it goes beyond that, there's a gross pollutant trap on that site which will be maintained by Council in perpetuity. In terms of actual builders' waste on the site, as conditions of consent are applied to DAs for residential dwellings, that will then control any waste that was blown off those sites, and our development compliance team will obviously deal with that along with our certifiers as those developments roll out.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the GM to Mr. Wilton, with regard to this development, the concerns I think a lot of us have in the community, seeing that the road width going forward, and I know on some of the subdivisions that we do, Mr. Mayor, we have only allowed for 6 metres. I was wondering if we were to increase that to a 7 metre width, would it require a whole rezoning or a whole change? I'm just wondering if we could do it. And the other question I had was, why did we go away from a VPA on this? If you could tell us.
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr. Wilson.
Through the Chair, the original road widths were approved as part of a master plan, which included Narrow Ponds as well. They were reduced road widths. Unfortunately, at this stage, given that the master plan was approved, we'd be unable to go back and revisit that as such. In relation to the second part of your question, the voluntary planning agreement requires the consent of both parties. Obviously, the applicant is no longer willing to participate in that VPA, and accordingly it's been abandoned.
So if I was to move in the motion that the road widths be increased by a metre, that would be something that would be up to council. And I know it's already been in the master plan, but why could that not be accommodated if it's appropriate with the developer?
Through the Chair, that's obviously been approved as part of the master plan. The developer would obviously have to come forward with a modification application to the original master plan, which would obviously trigger a redesign of that.
I might try that out. Thank you, Mr. Wilton.
Councillor Turler.
Yeah, in the recommendation it mentions deferred commencement conditions. Is there any reason why they have to be deferred? Why can't they just be part of the consent? In other words, the applicant can't do any work until he meets these deferred commencement conditions.
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, the deferred commencement conditions have been applied in relation to this consent because they relate to certain issues that would create uncertainty in relation to the validity of the DA if they weren't imposed. So essentially sewer modelling, if the sewer modelling came back that there was significant issues in terms of the sewer, obviously we'd be issuing what they call a Clayton's consent. It would have no benefit.
Okay, Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor. For Mr Wilton, in relation to the question I asked Mr Delamonte about plantings on the residential blocks, particularly the smaller ones, could you offer any comment on what sort of condition would be required, a deferred commencement condition, to allow council to be involved in increased advanced plantings on those blocks?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, if the council's in mind to provide landscaping treatments to the residential blocks that were proposed for sale, essentially you'd need a design guideline or a landscaping design guideline. That can be imposed on those lots via what they call a Section 88E instrument, which is a public positive covenant. If they were done by a Section 88B instrument, you do run the risk that if people do compliant development on those sites, that can be overridden.
Thank you. No other questions? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. More a clarification than a question. Councillor McLaughlin just suggested a possible motion coming forward in regard to the road width. If this chamber this evening agreed with that, can you give me an indication how far this would push this project back? Just an indication.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, we'd have to do some calculations in terms of the actual footpath widths and whether there's any room to rejig those road widths within that. If that couldn't be accommodated, essentially there'd be a full redesign of the project.
Councillor Halstead. No, away you go. In relation to the road widths, Mr. Wilton, in the narrower roads, how many roads are affected and how many metres, do you know?
Through the Chair, I believe the majority of the internal roads are around about 6 metres. There's a couple of collector roads in there are slightly wider than that.
Yeah, but how many are of the narrowest roads? Do you know how many roads are of the minimum width?
In the internal roads, you're probably looking about 7 or 8.
Right. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Halstead.
Yes, I'll move the motion that's in there together with, in other words, it'll be a second part to it, which is that the internal roads reservation width be a minimum of 7 metres. In fact, I'm not too sure it's road reservation. I think it's curb to curb, so it's probably carriageway. That's what you're talking about, isn't it? Carriageway, Mr. Wilton? When you talk there?
Correct, carriageway.
Yeah, so it's carriageway width. I'll speak to it when you think it's appropriate.
Yes, you moved the motion.
Well,
you have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that. I haven't
You can add, pardon?
I have a slight amendment too, if I could.
All right, we'll wait until the motion goes up and then you can ask Councillor Halstead whether he'll accept part of your recommendation into his motion, otherwise it'll have to be moved as an amendment. So, that the internal roads within the subdivision...
The internal carriageway widths
carriageway
are
widths...
to be of a minimum 7 metres in lieu of the 6. To put the in lieu bit.
Okay.
But, I think it'll be second part of it.
Now, just before you speak, Councillor Halstead, Councillor McLaughlin, your suggestion?
My suggestion is to...
Yeah, hang on. Can you just turn off your mic, please, Councillor Halstead?
Wants to go first. Well, my suggestion is to protect the heritage item, Mr Mayor, and I'm asking for an 88E to be placed on the heritage site of that property, so that it stays as a curtilage and doesn't get subdivided any further. I hope you'll accept.
Okay.
Would you accept that?
with the heritage idea generally.
Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin, will you resume your seat?
Yep.
So, Councillor Halstead will consider the addition that an 88E instrument be placed over the curtilage of the heritage items. Have you got just the curtilage?
Yeah, to protect the curtilage.
Oh, it's up there, is it? Is that the wording you want?
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
Okay. So, Councillor, right, well, if you resume your seat, Councillor Scanton
Thank you,
for an addition.
Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Halstead. I actually have this with our manager of words up there. If you could just bring that up, please. And Councillor Halstead, that just there's a section 88E additional deferred commencement condition that requires the proponent to prepare a residential landscaping design guidelines to be approved by council prior to the issue of a operational consent, and that should be reflecting the heat load and the closeness.
I know
of
that you're not speaking to it.
No, that's it there.
Right.
I was just trying to read it in.
Then I'm going to ask council staff to comment on this, please. That addition, Councillor Halstead has to accept it. Can I ask, through the General Manager, does the landscaping plan that that is submitted, would that cover that, or the conditions of consent?
Through the Chair, it's in addition. So the landscaping plan that is contemplated within the actual deferred commencement conditions only relates to the streetscapes. So it's not actually in relation to the residential blocks themselves.
Okay, so as far as you can see, this added addition is not a concern to the planning staff?
Through the Chair, there's no concerns raised by staff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure if it's a section 88E.
No, Councillor Skin.
You have a question to start?
No, we've got a motion. We haven't passed it, so you can still take a question, but Councillor Halstead, Councillor Turley, Councillor Halstead is on his feet. Thank you.
Yeah, look, so now I'd like to speak to it very briefly because I don't think it needs a lot of time.
Well, hang on, before you do, you want to ask another question? Before we've got the motion, next move will be a debate. Councillor
If I
Halstead.
can, just ask a question. I know the question's been asked about the road widths, but can you reinforce that this is not going to be a total redesign of the whole project again after now since 2011? Public consultation's already gone through its process.
Okay, so the question is, do you feel that the motion is achievable without a total redesign, basically? Mr. Wilton?
Through the Chair, with actually going back and reviewing the engineering plans that have been submitted, basically in concept, the actual road verge widths, including, so it's the road pavement and also the footpaths, you're looking between 16 to 18 metres. So there may be some room to play around with there prior to, obviously being able to make the pavement width wider.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Halstead, you have the... Will you turn your light on, please, Councillor Halstead?
is straightforward as far as I'm concerned. That's exactly how you deal with it, so you don't have any major change. Do I agree with the fact that there was a plan of management or whatever was referred to there before? Not a plan of management, but an overall plan. Let me hark back to East Barrel. That's what started with East Barrel. Now, when it was divided into about 10 areas, each developer did their own thing, subject to these sorts of conditions, which related to road widths. And you'll see there that you don't have any problem. In the adjoining subdivision to this one, I think anyone that drives around there and is confronted with a 6 metre wide curb-to-curb road will have great difficulty. In fact, you won't be able to go between two parked cars. And there has been some additional traffic management there in the way of signage, which is pretty poor, which restricts parking so that someone can get past. But, to do this, to bring it up to 7 metres, will ensure, to be quite frank, that people will be able to pass one very slowly down the middle between the two that are parked. And in reality, that's exactly what happens. As an engineer, when I drive around, or just as a ratepayer driving around the adjoining one, without necessarily referring to it, it's quite frank, unacceptable from a safety point of view and also from the point of view of traffic movement at a reasonable speed. So, to me, I commend you to this, this motion to you, because I think it's common sense. And I don't believe for a minute that there's any requirement legally to comply with that plan that was talked about some years ago. But by the same token, the developer would be good to be working in with him. But the way Nick spoke is what it's all about. In other words, you can play with the total road reservation to still get the 7 metre carriageway width. So I commend it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, rising as a seconder to this, just to say that, of course, our car ownership is continuing to grow in this shire, and these small blocks and roads need the accommodation of multiple car ownership families. And we only have to drive around certain parts of the shire, which were developed some years ago, to see the car load there. So this is why I'm supporting the increased width. And on the matter of driving around, if you're coming back from Sydney, you look over at Wilton and you see a sea of roofs with no green cover at all there, Mr Mayor. And that's because there's no advanced plantings taking place at the time these fence-to-fence type homes are being built. And they are big homes on small blocks. So I'd like to thank Councillor Halstead for including my addition there, because that will hopefully focus on the developers here looking at having a green development and looking at, hopefully buying from local nurseries advanced plantings that go in front and back of these homes.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this, and I'm pleased, and I thank Councillor Halstead for including my little addition there with regard to Kilroy. This heritage site is nearly 16,000 square metres. So I'm just putting in place, and now it's in place, that it'll stay there. So the 88B or the 88E will maintain that property in perpetuity. And I think us all driving down there can see that that is a significant heritage item, so I'm pleased to see that. As far as this, the road widths, I think that's important. I think you've mentioned it yourself, Mr Mayor, with regard to where, if we can accommodate this, we need to, and for all the safety reasons that Councillor Halstead has talked to. And I hope the developers take that on board. I'm disappointed it's taken so long for this to come through, but it's now coming through, and I think it's going to be passed tonight, so good luck with that, and I think it'll be a relatively good project. I know that we've had our heritage people look at it. I know Charlotte Webb has looked at how we can soften the approach. There is quite a large green belt between the highway, so that it's not something that's going to be in your face. And the other development further down has been screened nicely, and we're hoping for the same effect on this, because Jeff Knox has screened that one off. And so hopefully, apart from the small roads we allowed then, which we shouldn't have, let's make this a better development. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Whipper.
I support the recommendation, Mr Mayor. I'd like some assurances, though, particularly about flooding. And I say that because we know the development upstream of certain residences have caused an enormous problem with flooding. I know that we're doing some work in Braemar Avenue to relieve some of that stress from flooding, but when you're at the end of the line and when there's increased development upstream, we know that that hard surface generates a lot more runoff, not only volumes of water that have potential impacts, but as I said, also in terms of polluting the river or the creek in this instance. I know that years ago there was a lot of money spent on that unnamed creek. A lot of planning was done, and there was a time when there was actually invertebrates and sort of water life in that rivulet, and also platypus. They're not existent anymore, which means that there have been some environmental impacts to date. So I'm concerned, and I have the assurances, and I hope I was right in hearing that there will be gross pollutant traps, there will be detention basins, so that the amount of water that's coming off that site won't be increased beyond the level that it is at the moment, and that any refuse that enters those gross pollutant traps will be cleaned by council. Now, I know I can't ask questions, but a simple acknowledgement of that statement would be helpful. Otherwise, it might alter the way that I vote, that's all, because that's a real concern to me.
I would think I could say the answer is yes to both answers. I think without getting the staff involved, there's 3 retention basins on the site, and as Councillor Halstead has pointed out, as long as they're cleaned out regularly and as needed, then there shouldn't be a problem. I'll ask the question, Councillor Whipper. Will the pollutant traps be in place and serviced on a regular basis, and will they be installed?
Chair, without entering into debate, that is correct. So they'll be form part of the actual staging of the subdivision, and they'll be maintained by council in perpetuity.
Okay. And the water volumes, the levels that leave the development site, will not be increased beyond the existing?
Depending on the flood, I suppose, but I think that's a question that is yes, subject to a 1 in whatever 100-year flood to
Because you know, Mr Mayor, that we've had concerns about that area for a long time.
We have.
Anybody that's experienced a flood live under a lot of stress every time it rains and every time those waters levels rise. So I think I think we're doing due diligence by asking those questions.
Well, I think the other thing, Councillor Whipper, and I know you've had a very much supportive of the residents down there, but I think once the culvert's upgraded and bigger pipes are placed underneath, then that will allow the disbursement of water much more readily. But the engineers have assured us that they have put adequate drainage problem, to facilitate any floodings that can be foreseen.
All right. And if the engineers are wrong, I'm sure we'll hear about it.
No doubt you will let the council hear about it, Councillor.
No, that's right.
Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No doubt any problems will come back to council. But reading through the report, Mr Mayor, a number of issues jumped out at me, which have been brought up by my fellow councillors. The flood study was done by Storm Consulting in 2010. So that's some time ago that's applying to this. And these days, with climate change, the storms seem to be more intense and fast-flowing water catchment areas. So I truly hope that this is adequately covered. I'm also concerned with the road widths, and Councillor Halstead has put in a recommendation there for us to adopt. But the applicant's here, and I hope that he takes notice of the concerns that the councillors have. If we could just get that extra metre in those smaller road widths, it will make all the difference with this development. I mean, this master plan was adopted many, many years ago, and councillor just recently went through an extensive consultation with the applicants for the Kumunji site and put a lot of work into the road widths up there. So we're asking that we know from the Nadai Ponds area the road widths are too small, and as soon as someone parks on the side, you can't get through if there's two there. So we need to have some more room there on those road widths. Also, I'm happy to see that the fencing is going to be 2.5 metres to protect the residents that are 25 metres from the railway line there. With those heavy trains going through, I hope that those houses will be built to a quality that will sustain the noise level for them. So I hope that that will be adequately covered. So I'll be supporting the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Any other speakers? Councillor Turlin?
Look, the only thing I've got is knowing a little about the ARTC and the noise. When you look at this report we've got here, we've got nearly 4 different times it mentions the fence. When you look at the conditions on page 10, 59 and 95, 95 relates to Water New South Wales, nothing to do with the fence. It must be 94. When you go to 94, it actually says a 1.8 metre fence, but then you go to another section in this report and it says a chain wire fence. This is to stop sound in relation to the railway. So
No,
I'm explaining my position, and then you guys can fix it up later on. But you know, it says a chain wire fence on page 59, which is item 96, and this is all to do with actually trying to protect the owners that buy this property and keep the noise down. This document doesn't relate to it. It needs to be corrected before that DA goes out. Otherwise, you can have a chain wire fence along the major railway line. I have no problem with the development. It's gone out on public exhibition. The DCP had been approved back in 2011, and therefore it should go ahead. I hope that the redesign of the road does not change the road widths.
Thank you. I disagree with your comments on the fence, because there will be a chain wire fence along the entire route, the way I read it. A fence is required for security, therefore the fence will be contiguous along the whole boundary for aesthetics, but where there is going to be sound problems, then a 1.8 fencing is acoustic, but they have agreed to a 2 metre high fence. So the ARTC said 1.8, but the recommends a 2 metre high, and that's what's going to be built. So I do take yours and Councillor Nelson's concerns, but I just, myself reading, I think it's being met. But as long as it is, Councillor Turlin. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a correction, I think you've got it right. Item 59, it's absolutely specified a capped and lapped 2 metre fence, timber fence.
Thank you. Okay, before you sum up, I'll be supporting the recommendation, Councillor Halstead. I think that's a wise move that you put in the 7, and I think from here on in that no subdivision in the Shire should be permitted under a 7 metre, minimum 7 metre road carriageway in any subdivision. I think 4.5, we've learnt from Nadai Ponds that they're narrow. I hope that the applicant can accommodate that extra 500 mils on each side of the road to allow it without any major problems. But we do live in an area that does have a feeling of spaciousness, and when we have the chance, we should try and include those sort of recommendations. So I support it. Thank you, other councillors, for putting your recommendations forward, and Councillor Halstead for accepting them. Back to you.
Yeah, well, be quick. Quite frank, the master plan is a thing of the past. It's tantamount to a DCP, which is a guide, so I've got no problem in terms of the legality of that one. But the 6 metre wide road reminds me very much of the last time I drove through Castle Crag in the area designed by Burley Griffin, because his were less than 6 metres, and you certainly couldn't get a car down if there was one car on one side in certain locations. So they're actually smaller than that. But, you know, to me this is common sense. Clearly the detention basins were necessary. We had to have great discussion on that earlier today, as the council sitting around here would know, and thank goodness for the man over there called Mr Chauncey, I think it is, because that gave me a lot of satisfaction in terms of understanding that the right things had been put in there. In other words, I feel very confident when he spoke that the detention ponds were included in the conditions through whatever methods, which could include construction certificates down the line. But the fact is we needed them there together with the gross pollutant traps, which stops the rubbish from going down the road to, Mr Mayor, you know, the location we're all aware of. And in fact, the last time we went there, we saw chunks of the white plastic stuff in the creek then. And that was a year ago, I think we looked at that. So it's a continual problem coming down from upstream. Look, to me, it's all pretty straightforward. The fact that Councillor Whipper spoke about, you know, whether, and I think Councillor Nelson too, he rightly brought up flooding and made an issue of it. It's the number one requirement in any planning exercise is proofing for flooding. Now, you know, the reference has been made in the conditions to Australian rainfall runoff, which is the equivalent, and adopted as an Australian standard. So for a 1 in 100 year or 1% flood, I mean, it's covered. So you'd have to have a massive one through there to exceed those levels. So I'll just leave that with you, and thanks.
Thank you. And before I do put the the Councillor Halstead has an acknowledged staff member and Mr Ross Chauncey over there who worked with Mr Delamonte to get it. Well done, the pair of you, and it's good to see a subdivision come through with without huge amount of arguments. Okay, so I put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. So that's carried unanimously. Now 10.2 has been withdrawn on page 64, so we go straight through.
Question, Mr Mayor?
There's a resolution that...
Question? A question?
No, hang on.
A question?
Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
A question to staff, and I know the answer, it's a Dorothy Dix, but nice to put on record. How many times can someone put an application in and then withdraw it?
I was about as many times as they wish, but...
Well, this has been going on 3 years, Mr Mayor.
Question,
Yeah.
Councillor Starr. Mr Wilton, through you, General Manager.
Through the Chair, any proponent can lodge a number of applications and have them withdrawn at any time.
Okay, right, so I can go in. How long's a piece of string? Councillor Scandrett, you have a recommendation you wanted to make? Okay, secondly, move Councillor Scandrett that the development application 17/1457 be noted. Any discussion? Then I put it. All in favour, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. We move to page 104, 12.1, proposed licence agreement, Mittagong Rotary and Lions Club. Moved Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Nelson, was it? Councillor Nelson? Oh, Councillor Andrews. Seconded Councillor Andrews. Any discussion? Then I put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. We now move over to page 110, proposed lease 71 Station Street, Barrel. For the gallery, this is a property the council owns in Station Street and has been leased for quite a few years to the applicant. Move Councillor Whipper.
I'm going to move it.
I've moved it, Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Scandrett. You have the right to speak to it if you wish.
Well, I put my light on, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett, Councillor Scandrett, I took the vote, the nomination. It's not going to change the world if you don't move the recommendation.
I just want clarity. If you want a mover, do they have to put the light on?
Thank you. Yes, I accept what you say, Councillor Scandrett. Do you have any question or
Yes,
any...
as it so
Right,
happens, I
a question.
do.
The motion's been moved. You have the right to ask a question.
Fine, I'll ask the question.
Right.
Thank you.
Get it
Thank
off
you
your
for
chest.
clarifying that, so we all know what page we're on. My question is, what is the rent being proposed for this renewal of this lease for 3 years?
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr Paul.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the lease proposes currently to be a lease fee of $27,852 per annum, but that will be reviewed through that 3-year period.
Plus outgoings.
They pay the outgoings, yes.
They paid the outgoings. All right. Councillor McLaughlin.
Oh, just how long have we owned the property, Mr Mayor? I think it's interesting to know how long we've owned it.
I don't think...
You know, no, I think it's important to know.
It's a long time.
I know, and you know why it's been a long time?
Because it was for the station.
Exactly. That's why I've asked the question, Mr Mayor.
You knew the answer. Councillor Nelson.
That's good. Yes, Mr Mayor. Having been working for council and having the property section come under my jurisdiction in that time, the Auto Electrics Proprietary Limited, they've had this property for a number of years, and we used to tell them that yes, you'll be moving out soon. Won't be too long now, and we did apply commercial rates to them. And they're renewed at various times. So, yep, they're still there and they're still getting a 3-year lease.
And your 15, your legacy lives on, Councillor Nelson. Then I put the recommendation, all in favour, those against carried. Page 115, investment report, 12.3, May 2019. Somebody move. Councillor Whipper, he's got his light on. Councillor, and I'll take Councillor Nelson, but he didn't have his light on. For, okay. So is there any questions to staff? Councillor Turlin.
You can... it's not actually a question, it's actually good to see the BDCU is actually in the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sterling. How did we not know you were going to ask that? Put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. We move to page 121, 12.4.
Mr Mayor, can we just have a short introduction on this one?
Can we have an introduction? Yes, we certainly can.
Mr Lure.
Thank you, Mr Lure.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. Through the chair. The purpose of the report is to introduce the draft road maintenance policy and then also seek approval for it to go out on public exhibition. So just quickly a bit of background. Council currently has an unmaintained roads policy which restricts Council as the roads authority on undertaking any maintenance or any works on what we classify as unmaintained roads. So these are real lower order roads, not generally constructed to Council standard. The public still utilise them to access their properties and whatnot. So through some research and whatnot, we have proposed that we introduce the draft roads maintenance policy and include all roads that Council are the roads authority for within its management framework. That includes taking on a more of a risk-based approach to managing our road network. And for the lower order roads, looking at them from the perspective of safety and access, not so much ride quality, because we do have limited resources, obviously. So that's the approach for the new roads policy, and I think the outcome will be a lot more positive for the community. And we are hopefully going to get some feedback from the community during the public exhibition period.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr Lewis? Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Lewin. With regard to the unmade roads, I understand what you've told us about our policy and resources to maintain them or not maintain them. But I imagine with regard to access for fire brigade, ambulance services, there would be some sort of maintenance that would have to be maintained for these people because they are paying rates. Would that be correct?
So currently, through the chair, currently the unmaintained roads policy restricts our ability to undertake any maintenance on an unmaintained road.
No maintenance at all?
No maintenance at all. So the new policy will allow Council the ability to undertake that based on a risk-based approach.
Okay, Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, could I ask through you, Madam GM, I note on page 122 it excludes Crown or RMS managed roads, and of course that would include Wombi and Caves Road, which part of which we do the service on behalf of that through the grants. With the possible future change in ownership of certain Crown lands, could that possibly mean that we might have to revisit this policy if we get handed such roads?
Through the Chair, no, the Wombi Caves Road, for example, is a regional road which Council does manage. So there are certain state roads that the RMS are responsible for, like the Hume Highway, for
yes,
example.
the big ones, yeah.
So this policy does not exclude those roads. Those roads are included in that. Any current Crown roads that do become council managed roads will be included in the policy. They will become a council managed road and be included as per any other road that
we will categorise it accordingly.
We would not have to modify the policy.
And Madam GM, if you indulge me, I have a question in relation to the next, the promotion of this policy in terms of when is the next Wingecarribee today due to go out, could we ask? Because I'm going to move that be
well, I think
involved.
that could
Mr. Summers?
be directed to Mr Summers. Early September.
Okay. I'm going to move the motion, amended motion. I'll do that when you're ready.
Thank you. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification, Mr Lua. So there are benefits in this policy for the community?
Yes. I see benefits for those people who currently have issues from a safety or an access perspective to get to their property, and currently council cannot undertake any works to assist them. Now, if they make a request when this new policy is adopted, council staff can go out and investigate that, undertake a risk assessment to determine what the safety risks are, what the access issues are, and then seek approval to undertake works to rectify those.
Okay.
That previously under the current policy wouldn't be able to happen.
It's very positive. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the Councillor Turnbull.
Oh, no, you're on.
Oh, where are you going?
Look, the question I've got you, an unmaintained road. If a group of owners wish to secure a portion of a road in front of their property as a group and then do a right of carriageway between them, and then they can maintain that road, is that achievable? A group of owners on both sides or one side want to fix the road for themselves?
It would have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure in terms of the road, what the use of the road is, whether it would be a road closure would be required.
Not a road closure. If they're going to put their money on that road to service what they want,
Yep.
a group of owners, can that happen?
Yeah.
Mr Lua?
If it's a public road, no, we would be undertaking the works.
Thank you. Councillor Markward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A question through the Chair. I just wish to confirm that the lower order roads, the priority will be on risk and safety and access and not ride quality. So ride quality arguably could suffer, but the risk to life and limb will decrease. That's the main benefit?
Through the Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can I remind councillors, please speak into the microphones. Otherwise, those thousands of people who are watching at home will only be able to lip read, and that would be such a waste of time, of their time. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and listener. I'd like to move the recommendation, but amended as follows, where it says a period of 28 days. I would like to change that to read 56 days or 60 days, as the staff may advise, so as to include publicising this draft policy in Wingecarribee today. And I'll just explain why.
No, you have to have a seconder first.
Well, I need to explain why.
No, you don't have to explain why.
Well, I want to
Councillor-
capture...
You've been,
Thank you.
it's been seconded by Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Councillor. And the reason for that, Mr Mayor, is that the people who are at the end of these roads, who don't read the papers and don't listen to the local radio and so on, where we might be promoting this, won't know about this policy. The very people who need this policy, they need to know about this, right? Need to know. So I'm suggesting that seeing Wingecarribee today goes to all ratepayers, that is the appropriate time to do this. There's no urgency. If the staff say to me that should read 90 days, so be it. That's why I'm putting that up. I'll let the debate go on from there.
Okay, Councillor Nelson.
Just looking for clarification, Mr Mayor, on how long we should advertise the policy for. Councillor Scandrett mentioned a number of days, but I'll be guided by the staff.
Okay, so this is a clarification, not entering into debate. We have a standard. The standard
We've
policy
got 56 up here at the moment.
is 28 days. That's our, as far as I know, our standard policy. Comment from staff in relation to extension out to 56. No worries. Okay.
Right, thank you.
Mr Mayor, that should say 56 to include Wingecarribee today.
And include Wingecarribee today. Okay, now hang on.
I'd like to ask Mr. Summers, when in September? Wingecar? First week. So will 56 days? Well, it won't, because... Yeah, you have to wait till September to do the exhibition.
No, your seconder is getting shaky ground here.
Why can't it be advertised and you just extend it out to the end of September?
So the exhibition period
90
could
days.
start now and go through until
Why not just start an exhibition period in September for 28 days?
mainly because Councillor Scandrett is moving the recommendation, that's why. So,
Just make a comment.
I think we're hearing 90 days.
oh no, I'm not going. Come on, let's go for
Mr.
a
Mayor.
full 12 months. The GM would like to make a comment, then Councillor McLaughlin. Let's not throw up a piece of whether it comes down heads or tails. I mean, you can't keep extending different policies. Madam General Manager.
I just think, councillors, if you have it out there for 90 days, it will go stale and nobody will maintain interest in it. If you want to capture it in Wingecarribee today, commence your consultation at the beginning of September, run it for 28 days, and then it can come back to
Move
council.
that motion, that was me. Defer this.
Hang on, wait. No, you don't have to defer it. We can deal with it.
Okay.
Subject to the exhibition period commencing the 1st of September for 28 days. And to include Wingecarribee today. So let's change that motion around. That the exhibition period of the road maintenance policy commence 1st of September and end on the 28th for a period of 28 days. And that's to include, and two, that it be published in Wingecarribee today.
It's already into the first.
Okay, it's already included. Okay, we happy with that? Thank you, Madam Minutator. Put the motion, all in favour? Aye. Oh, sorry. I'll have to, you had your light on, so I'll let you speak before I declare it carried.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've got no problem supporting the recommendation, but my mind does boggle about these people that live down the end of unmade roads who can't get radio, carrier pigeon. I'm just wondering how we're going to get Wingecarribee today through if we can't get any other information through. So,
I take your cynicism, Councillor Whipper,
I'd just like to see us get on with it and do something good for them.
I happen to agree with you, Councillor Whipper, but there seemed to have been a level of support. I think those who live on unmained roads, if they want to comment, I get the comments. You and Councillor Halstead have also had the comments. But that is it. It seems to be in agreement. I put the recommendation, all in favour. I declared it carried. We move to 12.5, page 137, proposed sale of council property lots 1261 and 1262 through to 1265.
I move that we hear this enclosed.
Move that it be enclosed. Secondly, Councillor McLaughlin, to be discussed enclosed. Then, do I put it to the, no. I put that all in favour. It was a move Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor McLaughlin, that it was going into closed.
No, councillors. Under the new Code of Meeting Practice, if the public want to object to a matter going into close, they have to give 2 business days' notice in writing to council.
So that is a fair time prior. People have got to be reading the business paper. Put it all in favour. Against, carried. So the same happens with
No, I've got a
Franklin
motion. I've
Street.
got a recommendation to go up.
Okay, there is
Franklin
a
Street.
report there. Councillor Turland. So we're looking at 12.6, proposed sale, 10 Franklin Street, Mittagong.
I've got a recommendation that should be, or a motion that should be coming up, not the recommendation. Okay, I'll read it out. That council proceeds with the consideration of an expressions of interest for non-for-profit organisations to apply to provide...
I'm not going to allow that.
Well, you have to.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
I do not.
Why
That
do you not
is
have to do-
confidential information.
This is not confidential. You say it's for sale, I'm actually doing exactly what I should be allowed to do by putting a recommendation, a motion forward, saying that it should be used for what I've just...
Okay, put it up.
Okay.
Oh, there
Read
it is.
again.
It's up
Have you-
now.
Have you got it again yet? Have you found it?
I'll second it.
I'll read it out again if you wish. The council proceeds with the expressions of interest to non-for-profit organisations for the consideration of applying to provide social responsible development, affordable housing, aged care and disabilities for the residents in our shire.
Amendment, Mr Mayor.
I will be moving amendment from the chair. I will be moving an amendment that it be discussed in closed committee. Councillor Scandrett.
All right.
Amendment.
Yes, Mr Mayor. My amendment is that
We have an amendment.
in view of recent interest that has arrived today on this site, that the site be put to public auction in due course, well, within 60 days. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder?
We'll see. We will see.
Lapses for the want of a
Well,
seconder.
we want to sell it, don't we?
I will move from the chair an amendment that this matter be discussed in closed committee. Seconded Councillor Nelson.
Mr Mayor, can I just, I believe that the amendment is the motion. It was the motion.
Yeah, well,
So,
I'll move.
yeah,
Yes.
just-
Okay, well, I'll move the... Thank you, Councillor Whipper. I'll move the recommendation from the chair as an amendment. You can speak to the motion.
Well, you know, for years that I've been trying to actually provide social housing, responsible housing in our shire, there's no doubt. We have an opportunity on this bit of land that we're talking about, Franklin Street, and it's been going around for many years. We have an opportunity to provide low-cost, affordable housing to the people in our shire. More importantly, there is no non-for-profit retirement village in Mittagong, Northern Shire. We provided the same thing to Harbison Homes in Barradoo back probably 50 years ago. We did the same thing in Moss Vale for Harbison Homes. We know there's a huge waiting list in both of those facilities, non-for-profit. And here we have an opportunity that allows us to do something on a bit of land that we own in Mittagong. And I find it extraordinary that we go off and sell this bit of land, which doesn't go to public view all behind closed doors, which I don't like. But we have an opportunity right now to take control and look after our community. We have this one option. Council doesn't own any other land in Wingecarribee big enough to provide for non-for-profits. The opportunity's there now. If we lose this opportunity now and we give it away to somebody else at a very discounted price, they'll never come back. And that's not the way we should be treating our community and property that we own.
Through
If
the
nothing
chair,
more-
Councillor Turner.
If nothing more, what should happen? These debates should be in the public arena for them, the community who actually own the land, to make the decision, not by a bunch of people behind closed doors making a decision which they don't own. They might be ratepayers, but there's another 40,000 other ratepayers there, and they need a voice. We need to give them a chance. And I believe if we do, we'll be overwhelmed with the support of this motion. Now we can change it and add to it and twist it and make it work. Council should be part of this development for social housing. We can own it, and actually the community can get two benefits. They can get some income out of it, but they can also provide a service, exactly like Clamour does. One opportunity, councillors, we shouldn't lose it.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I seconded this, and I think I told you the other day that I really wasn't in favour of selling this land, and I'm of that opinion. Mr Paul, many years ago, told us about this bit of land, and his idea with that was that it would stay within council's ownership and we would lease it out. And I think Councillor Turland is pointed to the right direction. Some might say this is not council's core business, but we know the pressures on people in our community, especially older women, that haven't got a place and can't afford rents. I think this gives us an opportunity. The state government actually provides money to do these types of development when local government provide the land. It's something that we'll always own. It'll be a benefit to this community. To see it sold once it's gone. We sell it for a certain price, we think, aren't we doing well? We would look back in hindsight, like we did years ago when we sold off land in Redford Park, you know, many years ago, and they patted themselves on the back and said, what a wonderful deal we did. We look back on that now and say, what a catastrophe. So I applaud. We might go down on this, councillor. We probably will, but I think it's pointed to bring it out that this is very important to me. It's important to Councillor Turland. As a Labor councillor, it's something that I think we should be looking to do. I think Councillor Turland is here for the right reasons. He's put this up for the right reasons. We're not trying to undermine anything that council's trying to do. Obviously, we'd like to have the money. Obviously, we'd like to do things with the money. But once we have sold it, it's gone forever. If we lease this land out, we can do all sorts of interesting things on it. I know Mr Paul will tell us some of it is flood affected, and it is, but it doesn't mean it can't be used. It's what, 3,700 square metres. It's a massive block. It's a huge block. 37,000. So I got that. So it's a huge amount of land that I think we've got the opportunity. And look, we've only got, what, 14, 15 months to run in this council? I think if we put in place now the idea that it not be sold, that we look at this as a valuable asset for this community in Mittagong for what we're suggesting. Now we can talk about where that goes. Some of it might be commercial and give us a return. Some of it we can there's a lot of land to do something with, Mr Mayor. Other councils are doing it. We are putting on developers who come in here now, we are saying, how much is affordable housing? How much are you going to give us for affordable housing? And we're not doing anything ourselves, and we've got this opportunity. So I'm sorry, but councillors, think about this carefully, because once it's gone forever. I think if we just think about this, do not sell it.
Thank you. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I won't speak in any detail about the recommendation, but I'll speak to the merit of the recommendation that's been put, because I do see some value in it. I'm just wondering, though, if the mover of the motion would consider just a slight rewording to say that council provide a report to consider how we can call for expressions of interest. Yeah, so I'm thinking that way this stops the process that we're currently considering, but allows us the opportunity to talk in more detail and discuss with council the merits of the proposal, because I think there are considerable merits. But that way, I think we need, rather than just doing this off the floor on the run, it gives us time to consider what that report may be and what it might need to include, so we can go throughout that process. It just makes it more transparent, I believe. Yeah. So if you're happy to do that, I'm happy to support that recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Nelson.
Well, yeah, I can see the numbers are growing, Mr Mayor, all the time. This is outrageous, Mr Mayor. This is absolutely outrageous that Councillor Turlin bring this forward in this manner. Absolutely, yeah, he might have his supporters up the back there. Mr Mayor, I'd like to have some frank and open discussion on this matter, and that's why we're going to move it into closed committee, because it contains information that, if disclosed, confers a commercial advantage on people. Now, I'd like to hear from the staff as well. You know, in debate here at this point in time, they cannot give us any advice. They're not allowed to. But when we go into closed committee, Mr Paul and the General Manager will give us full and frank and open advice on this matter. And therefore, this recommendation of Councillor Turlin may well get up. But I'd like to hear the full debate from both sides, the administration staff and the rest of the councillors here. But I could see little whirling and dealings being done before this meeting, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Scandrick.
Well, Councillor Turlin, you've done it again. You know, here we are, brand new form that came out today, the Councillor Declaration of Interest. And it was only 3 years ago, Councillor Turlin, that you stood up in this chamber with two other councillors who are here tonight and declared that you had been involved in a discussion behind closed doors. Closed doors, Mr Mayor, with not-for-profit providers. And it torpedoed, it's on the minutes, it torpedoed a sale we had at the time, which was regarded by staff as a good sale. Now here we are again, there is a offer on the books with a recommendation from staff, and suddenly in the last 2 weeks we've had 3 more expressions of interest just come in from out there, and yet it's not being advertised. We haven't had it out there. Suddenly there's 2 not-for-profits appeared on the planet, one of whom we don't know who it is. The other one came in today, 10:20, and just before that another one came in from a local developer. So we've now got 4 players in this. Now, I can't talk about the numbers, Mr Mayor, but I can say this is not in our 2031 planning. It is not our core business, as much as I like to see solutions for people in need, right? But we have Argyle Housing, for example, who manage over 2,400 homes. 2,400 homes. We support them regularly. They're on our Housing and Demographics Committee, chaired by Councillor Mark Ward, and they're active in that space. They're looking for solutions, but they are funded by state and federal, not by council. We have no provision for this in any of our budgets whatsoever. This circus has been going on for 3 terms. I remember sitting up the back there waiting to see how we're going to sell this. And at that time, you, Councillor Turlin, wanted to sell Franklin Street and put the money into paying down the debt. Paying down the debt on the Mossvale pool complex behind us here. But you have to admit now that you are working behind closed doors.
The camera, please.
You're working behind closed doors, right? I mean, obviously the Mossvale pool pay down, the loan is gone. And I'm wondering here if Station Street is dead. I mean, this money could have helped with Station Street. So is Station Street dead? Is Station Street dead? It can't fund it? It's going down the tube? Is that what's happening? Or are we saving up for the next election, Mr Turlin? Is that what we're doing? Are we saving up for the next election? Pork barrelling, as it's been said before to me. Well, commercial is dead in the water, right? Commercial leasing, we could have had Masters, we could have had Kmart, any number of big players there before, And we now have a proposal. This is going to bog this down well into the next term of council, which is after September next year. Well, look, Mr Mayor, I'll happily support going into close because I want to have that debate in there vigorously. I want to find out what's going on here. And my preference is now to put it out to public auction. We've got some numbers from the staff which can be put into that in terms of the value and the reserves and so on. There's obviously enough interest in there. And if a not-for-profit housing provider wants to put their hand up, they can.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead.
Extraordinary debate, Mr Mayor. I'm going to support Councillor Turlin's motion at this stage because it's better than the current one. And what I'm worried about always is probity. And I use that word a bit, not too often, but it's all about probity issues. And quite frank, going into closed committee, I know there's provisions in the Act. I'll hear that from the GM and other admin people here. I'm well aware of that. I know what the provisions are and they're very detailed. But there's many ways in which land can be transacted. Public auction's probably the best. The alternative, one of the alternatives can be just market it for sale like any other block of land which a council can do, or this one, and it's a good start. So I'll be supporting that because I oppose going into closed committee on this issue and quite frank a number of others from time to time. But I'll go along with them to listen to debate. But at this stage I'll be supporting this one because I think it's got merit at the early stage. And no, I don't think it's pushing something into mothballs or anything like that, or deferring it to the never never. It's probably been very healthy debate for the last 2.5 years, to be frank. Well, whatever, you could talk about 3 terms, I'll confine myself to this council. And I know it's been longer than that, but the fact is, it's the community that's got to get the maximum benefit out of this, not some private sector developer. Maybe that's an issue for depending upon the way you sell it, but it's about probity. Now, if there's going to be an alternative such as this one, it's worth looking at. Now, if it doesn't go anywhere, and I think we've got to find out in a hurry whether it's going anywhere, Mr Mayor, that it isn't suddenly another wedge in there for a 12-month delay, but it's got to actually happen. And quite frank, I just oppose going into the closed committee on this one, as I do on some others. Like I said, I bite my tongue on some, but, you know, just watch, because I don't think that all issues that have even got the slightest doubt about them go into closed committee. That's my understanding of the Local Government Act. I know there's provisions there for protection to do it, but I think that you've got to be astute about how you do it, and you've got to make sure that, again, probity prevails.
Thank you. Councillor Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly agree with the sentiments expressed by Councillor Turland and Councillor McLaughlin, but I am a little blindsided by this. And this is what gives me the great deal of concern I have. To make a decision like this, I guess, on the fly, we're under pressure, time pressure to do it now. I really balk at that. I want a proper debate and proper discussion, and I follow Councillor Whipper's thought of a report, but also I'd like this to be discussed more in confidential, where we can actually have this out and actually hammer out all the details, so we can ask staff. I can't make a decision without talking to staff, hearing their views. That would be crazy. I need more information. So I can't support Councillor Turlin's position at this stage. Maybe I can in a few months' time, but I need that more information. So I'll be supporting basically the original recommendation at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marquardt. And before I give Councillor Turlin the right of reply, look, to discuss the sale of this land with the value that it is or not to sell, we've had, as Councillor Scandrett has pointed out, three other offers have come in. We haven't discussed them. We don't know the advantages of them. The amount of land that has been mentioned that can be built on has been totally exaggerated. The amount of land is nowhere near what is being put. Do you wish to speak? Sorry. Then I'll withdraw at this stage. Councillor...
I'll only be brief. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very brief, and I should speak on this. It's a difficult social argument to talk against Councillor Turlin's motion, and we have discussed this many times over the last 3 years, even the use of this site for social housing. affordable housing, etc. But I can't go past the fact that for the last 3 meetings, possibly more, but certainly the last 3 meetings, we've been discussing and went very close on the previous to determine the sale of this site only through a technicalities of back here now. And we have been blindsided, I certainly have. We need to go into close. I mean, it may well turn out the way that some here tonight believe it should, but we need to go into close. So I'll be supporting the original recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Whipper, are you going to speak against again, or...?
I've spoken to the motion. I take it I can still speak against the amendment?
Well, you can speak against the amendment if you wish. Yes, yeah. I'll give you that.
Thank you. Well, I am speaking against the amendment, but just in terms of procedure and transparency and probity, all those things, I noticed that Councillor Mark Ward did say that he'd like more information. The motion that's put forward gives us just that opportunity to have a report, to come back with that information, to have that discussion with staff, and at some point it may even mean that we need to go into a future closed council to consider this. But that's exactly the way I see the motion. So in speaking against the amendment, I just reinforce that fact that it gives us the opportunity.
Okay, I take that, but I'll resume where I left off, and that is in relation to answer your question. No, it is not transparent. It is not, the information won't be coming because we've got 3 other offers on the table, or requests for information. How can we discuss commercial in confidence, and monies have been, and amounts have been printed, so there is offers out there. I'm not going to discuss that in open committee, and with the greatest respect, and I agree with Councillor Andrews, yes, we do have a social conscience. We have a very high social conscience. As has been pointed out by Councillor Turlin, we have given land in Moss Vale, we have given land in Mayoral, we have given land for Argyle housing, we have given land for Challenge Southern Highlands. We have a responsibility also to our community where this money that could be spent if we sell that land and for other community benefit. So to say that we are not interested or this is a golden opportunity, we also take the responsibility away from the state government. I mean, wouldn't it be great if the state government said, we would love to buy this land so we could supply social housing? Wouldn't that be great? But sorry, we do have a responsibility to look at all options, and we are only looking now at one. 3 weeks ago, the council agreed on amount of money to sell it, and now here we are switching around again because somebody come up with another bright idea. Well, this council has got to make a decision and stick to it. We've been wishy-washy on it. Some have come and some have gone, and councillors, you can't do that. It doesn't give those people who want to invest in this shire the knowledge that, oh well, councillors, they can't even make a decision to sell us the land which they agreed on 2 weeks ago. And as for going into closed committee, all the councillors here, when we sold off, I think, 10 blocks of land to help pay down the debt to the Moss Vale Aquatic Centre, which we then rediverted for the community benefit to purchase land in Mayoral for extra parking, and they bought a house in next to the Mayoral Cemetery to extend that for the benefit of the community as a whole. Now, that's what we did, and that was discussed in closed council. So don't bring up this holier than thou that it should be discussed in open, because you discussed it in closed and moved and recommended as well that we discuss it in closed. That is commercial in confidence. Councillor Turl.
Well, I don't get you to speak for me, I'll speak for myself. $3.5 million we sold land. And the motion was to put it to the aquatic centre. I'll look at you because that's where the cameras are. I'm supposed to look at you. $3.5 million. We did not. We went to the public. We sold that land. It never went there. It went to two properties in Mayoral. One we paid about $1,500 a square metre, B2. Remember B2. This is B5 land. And you can build to 17 metres high with a floor space ratio bigger than any other site in this district, and we own it. Not anybody else, we own it. And we're going to give it away, B5, for a very discounted rate. Now, I won't tell you any more than that, but we know what we paid for Wattle Street. B2, $1,500 a square metre. Councillor Scandrett mentions 2,400 houses that Argyle Housing manage. That's from Wagga to Canberra, all the way up to Coffs Harbour. There's probably only about 200 here. I'm not talking to you, be quiet. There's 240. Well, he can't talk while I'm talking.
Yeah, well, just be
It's not
respectful.
2,400 homes in this shire. Very, very few amount in this shire. So we have an opportunity to correct and meet that gap. Now, people are saying that I've sidelined them. I've always been on this path from day one. From day one, I could see the benefit. And I can show you on my iPad. The reason why we stopped it last time was two reasons. This is the fact. The flood study was wrong. It's only just been corrected, but it's still not on the flood drawing of this LEP. It's still wrong. And the reason why we stopped it last time is because the valuation, do you want me to show you? The valuation indicated, as the valuer looked at it, that you could only build on so many square metres. It was wrong. No wonder the valuer said it was wrong. And the other reason why we didn't continue is because that particular person who tried to buy the site was had communications with Councillor Scandrett. But also he had...
Councillor...
Point of order.
Councillor, resume your seat.
Point of order.
You are not to mention... No, Councillor Scandrett.
I want my point of order, Mr Mayor. That is false, and I will be sending a legal letter tomorrow unless that's apologised.
It's not... Councillor Scandrett...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
No, I'm calling you on a point...
No, I'm calling you, Mr Mayor. Point of order. You can't have me defamed.
Excuse me. Councillor Turland, you've got an official warning. You are not to mention councillors by name, and you do, in my opinion, owe Councillor Scandrett an apology.
Well, I'll apologise, but the truth is what the truth is.
The
truth is what the truth is. I've apologised.
Councillor Turland, that you both have been at each other ever since this council started.
Yep.
Please resume your seat. Now, if you two carry on and try and defame each other publicly now, this is all live streamed, you don't get any glory out of it. You don't get any glory. The public out there who are viewing this are saying, what is this council up to again? The credibility of this council then goes down the tube more than it has now. Please respect each other.
Mr Mayor, I've never defamed Councillor Turland in the chamber, ever.
Councillor Scandrett, I will be turning Councillor's microphone off.
That's democracy.
Can I continue?
No, you may not.
Well, I haven't finished
because I haven't finished what I'm saying either. Because, as I just said, and you seem to have gone over your head, Councillor Scandrett, please treat each other in the respect that you both deserve. You deserve to respect Councillor Turland, and he should respect you. And if you don't, I'll close the meeting. Okay? Councillor Turland.
Now, the two properties that were mentioned before, Wattle Street and the
Mayoral
Cemetery, were purchases. They weren't us selling, they were purchases. And we set a limit. And unless we go out to the open market in any case, we never actually test the market. And I think the previous sale that we entered into at the time, or came close to it, was also that we found out that the potential buyer was actually trying to found out the other tenderers and was trying to offload the land before he'd actually paid for it. That's why we stopped it. Remember it? That was clear. So it's always been in my path to try and do something with this land for social benefit for the wider community. I find it extraordinary that we'll sell something in Mittagong and then go and put that money in some other area and miss an opportunity for the Northern Shire. Councillor Scannett, you seem to think that I'm pork barrelling. At this stage, I will not be running again, so you don't have to worry about that. This is my chance to try and do something good for the community, and hopefully my fellow councillors will follow. I will not put up with selling a bit of land behind closed doors without proper transparency and going through a proper process. If we're going to do that, I'm out of the game. I'll go to the Minister. I will not stop. What I will do is this motion in front of you now gives you an opportunity to take it to the next step for the right reasons. If you don't do that and you go down the other path, I think the public need to have a voice. They don't have a voice because they rely upon us to make the decisions for them. But we're not giving an opportunity for them to have a say.
Chair, please.
All we're saying is we're going to close council, we stamp it off, numbers go against us, bang, it's gone. Never comes back again. We've lost it. We need to make this opportunity stick for the community one occasion. If we don't, we're just throwing it all away. So there's no pork barrelling here from me, I can tell you, because I won't be standing again. I've done my 8 years in council. Somebody else can take the ball up and run it. But if I can achieve for the community long term, I'll be chuffed.
Okay, I put the amendment first. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. That we go discuss it in closed committee. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Andrews, Markwart and Gare. All in favour of the motion. I declare Councillors Turland, all against the amendment. Councillors Turland, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. I declare the motion lost. The amendment now becomes the motion. I put the motion. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Andrews, Markwart and Gare. It will be discussed in closed, and if you wish, it will be discussed in closed committee. Yeah, I call for those against who want their names recorded. Councillors Turland, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. We now move on to planning proposal to amend page 139, 13.1. Development for the purpose of senior living at 21 Borden Road. Councillor Whipper. Move the recommendation. Seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Put it. All in favour. Somebody else had their light. I did not see yours.
And I'd like to ask a question as well. Thank you.
Councillor Whipper, would you mind? I'll resubmit the motion. Here, I had his light on. I saw yours and saw yours as the red.
You can't have two red lights on at the same time.
No. His light was green and flashing. You turned yours on, off. His came on.
I don't want to cause
No.
a sleepless night.
Okay. I'll move that it be submitted. Move Councillor Mark Ward, second Councillor McLaughlin be resubmitted. Put it. All in favour. Against, carried. Councillor Scandrett, your question that is earth-shattering, please.
Well, I didn't need the commentary, Mr Mayor, but I just wanted to ask the question of staff as to, this has been around for quite a while, this site, and why has this site not gone some time ago through the Demographics and Housing Committee for discussion with this new proposal?
Okay, question through you, Madam General Manager, to Mr Wilton. Mr Pepping, sorry.
Through the Chair, the purpose of these matters to come to Council is for Council to provide its position in accordance with Council staff assessment. It's not normal protocol to send these sorts of matters to a committee prior to Council.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. I would have thought with a matter of this size that it might have been appropriate to do so.
Thank you. So now the mover and seconder are happy to still move and second it? Yes. Okay, Councillors Whipper and McLaughlin. Councillor Whipper.
Could I just say something?
You certainly may.
I'm a bit baffled by that line of questioning, Mr Mayor. We all know that at the moment, council are being given a very, very unique opportunity to have a role in determining what they want this shire to be in terms of local character statements. Why would we rush in and dissolve the opportunity to do that on behalf of the shire? And why would this come to the Demographics Committee when there's no need for it to come to the Demographics Committee? So community involvement will come through the process, the proper processes of planning, where the community will have a right to be involved in determining what they want to see this shire be. Do they want to see it full of seniors housing everywhere, your corner allotments with multi-layered dwellings, or do they prefer a more relaxed lifestyle with character in the villages and each of the towns having their unique flavour about them? So that's what this is all about. Why would we jump into making a decision when the state government are giving us a unique opportunity to determine what it is that we want in this shire? So I know all councillors were at those briefings and were given that information. So I don't understand the line of questioning by the previous councillor.
Well said, Councillor.
Councillor Markward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to echo Councillor Whipper's statements basically on the committee, the Housing and Demographics Committee. I am the chairman of that committee, and our key role now is to look at things like the local housing strategy and such like. We have a time frame of a year or so to get that done. Working with the community will be involved in that discussion, and that's our main focus. We cannot be not blindsided but detracted by operational decisions which can be made at this council, at this forum. That's what our role is. The committee's role is different. The committee's role is looking to the future, and that's what we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now that it's been put again, Councillor Scandrett?
Well, I'm going to speak. We're in debate.
Councillor Scandrett, I shouldn't have said it.
No, it's a red light, sir. And look, I just want to take councillors to page 141 of the report, where you look in there and it's zoned E3 environmental management. So this is quite a big discussion here, and I would have thought that we would want to take, in terms of planning, Councillor Whipper, and looking at future needs, we would like to take the community that we have engaged in that committee to get their feedback. I mean, this is going to go sit on a shelf now until such times as we move forward with that housing strategy. On that page further down, second last paragraph, it says, in accordance with the Wingecarribee local planning strategy, council continues to prefer the seniors housing, and in the next paragraph it says council also prefers. So the clue's in the words, Mr Mayor. The words clearly say we haven't got a strategy here. We're pushing this off because it doesn't suit us. Yet at this time, and yet we should be, I think, examining this, and I would like to hear from the committee that we have formed and put Councillor Marquardt and myself in charge of, to hear what their input would be. I mean, it's sandwiched in between other housing. There is seniors housing there. There is transport there. So it's probably, as the report says, it's got some merit, but does have some transport access issues in terms of the three-sided road coming in from Boardman. I just think it's something where we would have given the courtesy to send it to that committee and say, hey, what are the upsides, downsides? This is our little initial assessment. And in terms of where we're going with the new LEP. Now, that new LEP, that's not going to make this end of this term, is it? It's going to make next term. It's going to be saved for a rainy day. So I think we should have sent this out for comment.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Markward.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'm sorry to Councillor Scandrett.
You've spoken once. Have you
no, wasn't that a question? Have I spoken?
I know. I think Councillor Scandrett. There's no.
Councillor Markward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Markward. There's no.
I was just going to say size
amendment, or you'd to speak against it for you.
I was just going to say size isn't the issue for qualification to go to the committee. Size doesn't matter sometimes.
You got your last word in. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll be supporting Councillor Markward. His comment. Look, Councillor Scandrett is grandstanding here. We've done an inspection on this property. We know what's going on and where we're headed with this without giving the game away. And this needs to go through this process. And after it goes through this process, it'll go back to that committee and they'll have their input. But, we just need to calm down on the grandstanding.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, if my memory serves me correctly, the existing Pepperfield Seniors development was opposed by this council, and the only reason it's there is because we lost it in court. These senior developments are about getting high density and low density areas, let's face it. It's about maximising profit on land. So really, that's the push behind a lot of this. It's not because a lot of them sat there empty for years and years and years and no one took them up. Do people move to the Southern Highlands to live in high density housing? I don't think so.
Thank you. I don't think I'm going to even speak on this. Put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimously saved, Councillor Scandrett. We move on to page operational. And Councillor Scandrett requests his vote be recorded. Operational model for the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter, page 163.
Is there an introduction with this, Mr Mayor?
Move.
Yeah, I'm happy to move it. Is there an introduction?
Would you like an introduction, Councillor Whipper? Yes, moved and seconded, Councillor McLaughlin. And introduction, please, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to update councillors on the performance of the adopted trial of the in-house operational model for the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter over the past 3-year period, and to confirm the future in-house management of the facility going forward. Councillors will be aware that it considered 3 options in relation to the management of the facility in 2014, being option 1, in-house management, option 2, a mixture of in-house and external management, essentially operating the facility as a holding facility, and option 3 was being external management via contract. Following community consultation processes in 2015, there was overwhelming support for option 1, and councils resolved to operate the facility in-house on a trial period. July 2019 signals the end of that 3-year trial period, and the report seeks to continue to operate the facility in-house. During the trial period, the facility has been operated as a minimum euthanasia facility. Council has been able to achieve high rates of rehoming, including statistics of 91.5% average over that 3-year period for dogs, and also an average of 62.5% for cats. The facility continues to be operated within the adopted budget of $480,000 per annum, and should councils resolve to continue to operate the facility in-house, council staff are confident that the facility can continue to operate within the operational plan allocation for 1920. In 2015, Council entered into a contract with a local veterinary supplier following the tender process being undertaken, and the contract was later abandoned in 2017, and a fee-for-service arrangement was entered into with another provider. Should councils resolve to operate the facility in-house again, a new RFT will need to be entered into and established. The operational issues experienced between 2016 and 2018 mostly relate to both environmental and also infrastructure issues that have been detailed on pages 168 and 169 of the report this evening. The majority of issues are centred around the proximity to other industry and also ageing infrastructure at the animal shelter. As part of the trial period, Council continues to partner with both FOWOS and also volunteer groups in the delivery of companion animal management services, and between April 2017 and also 2019, FOWOS has donated in excess of $29,000 to the shelter, with the majority of costs being dog training, pet food and also elective vet surgery. The report this evening presents 3 separate options for the management of the animal shelter, and option 1 has been recommended to continue with in-house management.
Okay, comment, Councillor McLaughlin.
Just wanted to speak to the motion. Is that
Yep.
all right, Mr Mayor?
Questions?
Oh, you want
yeah,
questions?
take a question first.
Yeah.
Councillor Whipper, question?
Any other questions?
Yes. Okay, Councillor Scandrett, your light's on then, Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr Wilton. Could I ask, will the review that you're planning to do take into account the difficult circumstances now that this report shows at the at the existing site, and will you be looking for other sites? And if you do so, as part of that report, options I should say, will you be contemplating economies of scale of co-siting the shelter with other infrastructure?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, this report deals directly with the operation model of the animal shelter, not capital replacement, capital renewal or maintenance. Essentially, if councillors do choose to go down the path of operating the facility in-house, we will be bringing forward a separate report in August this year, which will detail issues that we are currently experiencing in relation to the existing facility and providing options in terms of capital maintenance or capital renewal.
And costings therein. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandra. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you, Madam Chair. Mr Wilton, could I just ask, have the volunteers been consulted in this process? And if not, when will they get their opportunity to have a say? I believe that there is a recommendation on the books of council to have a briefing session and include representatives from the volunteers, FOAS and the volunteers.
So the operational models that we're looking at this evening have basically been tested through community consultation back in 2015. Council staff have relied upon that community consultation process in order to make their recommendation in relation to this evening. I'm aware that there is a standing resolution on the books that both Council FOAS and also Council volunteers will be invited to a separate briefing session. We expect that briefing session will occur on the 24th of July this year.
Thank you. More questions, light? No questions? Turn your light off, please, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you much, Mr Mayor. Question through the Chair. Is the organisation or the animal shelter increasing in size in terms of perhaps staff resources, number of volunteers, number of animals processed, and roughly what is that rate on a year by year? Any idea?
Through you, Mr Paul. Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, the volunteer base obviously has increased at the animal shelter. I am aware that there's existing about 40 odd volunteers. That's increased by at least 10 since we've taken over the shelter. In relation to animal numbers coming through the facility, you're looking anywhere for cats in between 266 up to about 289 over that 3-year period. And then in relation to dogs, it's up to about 411 from 377.
So it is increasing generally?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor McLaughlin.
Did you want to speak to this first? Oh, right, okay. Look, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I second this because I think it's the way forward. I think what we've heard from the community, that an in-house facility, and we've tried a lot of other versions of this over the years. Obviously, we have our volunteers here today, some of those people that do raise money and do help council and are committed to this community. I think having it in-house and having our own facility, and as Mr Wilton said, going forward, there will be a report coming back looking at better facilities, hope for, because I do applaud the people that work out there. Council did do an inspection recently, and we saw what great work they do in a very limited sort of area, which, you know, they do get a lot of environmental stuff put on them all the time, and they do a great job. So I'm happy to support this, and I think that what we get out of it, and I think the community strongly supports it being in-house. There is a cost to that, like there is a cost to everything, but I think the community wants to see that we do look after our animals, and we do support this in the community. So I'm happy to support it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I was going to move an amendment, but I think Councillor Whipper and McLaughlin might include a point number 2 for the motion, which reads along the lines that a letter of thanks be forwarded by the Mayor, Councillor Gare, thanking Friends of Wingecarribee Animal Shelter for its invaluable assistance and work at the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter.
Yes, I'll be here.
And there are other volunteers as well. So if you can
well, we'll say all volunteers.
All volunteers.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Look, Mr Mayor, Councillors received an information session today on this, and when you look through the report and you read about the environmental issues there, the noise and the odour, and then the infrastructure issues there. It's a very well presented report that details the issues out there, and as Councillor McLaughlin said, we've had an inspection. In fact, we've had 2 inspections out there, and the staff do a fantastic job out there with the infrastructure that they have, and duly supported by all volunteers that come out there and do invaluable work. So that's my reason for moving number 3, and I'd also, just on a personal note, thank the staff for the work that they do.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson, and you've heard that over there, Vanessa. The councillors are very aware of the work. You are, it's your job, but thank you very much anyway. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you. Yeah, and before I start, I'd certainly like to thank FOAS, all the volunteers out at the shelter and the staff, and I do it in that order because I know that without the volunteers we wouldn't be anywhere. I go back to early 2012 when the Friends of the Pound were around, and they, because of their passion and compassion for animals, pushed this council very hard to look at moving a facility out to the Resource Recovery Centre, which was the only space available, to take them basically off death row. It was as simple as that. It was a tragedy. So without those volunteers pushing, we certainly wouldn't be where we are now, and I do sincerely thank them. And the staff do a wonderful job out there as well, under very trying circumstances and conditions. We saw today some of the photographs, and we have been out there as well. There's no doubt in my mind that we need to move that facility. It's really played a role, but now I think it's outdated. It's certainly not state-of-the-art. It's not providing what the community expects in terms of companion animal care. And I believe that a report will be coming to council to provide some options for possibly looking at relocation or upgrading of that site. So I look forward to that. But at this stage, I'm certainly happy to move the recommendation. I'm equally happy to hear that we've set a date for a briefing session for councillors and the volunteers, and that will certainly inform councillors for the following recommendation in terms of where we go from here in terms of companion animal care. So well done to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, look, I support the motion which has now been amended, and strongly support it. I'm an animal lover myself, and I don't get up and grandstand, but I put my money where my mouth is, as I'm sure most of you people in this room do. But in terms of animal welfare, that's high on my list. There's a couple of others in front of it, but I think it sits at number 3 in my philosophy. But, you know, the drive for privatisation, I think, is on the wane. Thank God, not that there's much left anywhere to sell at either state or federal level, but, you know, this council tried the alternative. You know, let's farm it out. You know, let's privatise it. Let's you know, get someone else to run it. Abysmal failure, I'd suggest. And in fact, one of the main reasons that would be is because the care would not have been there that you see that is evident today when you go to any one of these animal shelters around the place, particularly this one here, which in my opinion shouldn't be there, but because of the trying conditions, absolutely stupid site, but I understand the philosophy of why it ended up there, probably had no alternative, but it's got to be relocated. So I'm doing a bit of a pitch there, but simply this has got to be supported, and those that work there and some of the people that, you know, I bump into and they tell me, oh, they go and walk 4 dogs. Or 6 dogs, as one bloke does. I'm thinking, my God, could I find time to go out there and walk 6 dogs? Most people couldn't. So, I mean, obviously they've got a level well above mine in terms of animal welfare and certainly the love of animals. But, yeah, I've got cats. I had dogs. I've only got cats and magpies by the dozens now. But, and they sit with the cats, so that's interesting, isn't it? I must do a video of that for you. But, or on my foot. Take your pick. But in terms of the cat and the dogs, great. I mean, I inspected that recently and I was dumbfounded. In fact, I wasn't joking today when I said I would have taken that fierce bloody thing that was out there home, because I reckon I could have trained it, but maybe I was pitching a bit too much, because I think he was going to eat you if you tried to feed him. But I was quite amazed what I saw out there. But anyway, you do a great job. The photo I saw today, I think I'd refuse to work there. Because let me tell you, if that sort of dust got on my car, I'd never be back for another trip. Or any one of my 3 cars. I wouldn't want to be like that on a daily basis. I do not know how you tolerate it. But anyway, that's sufficient, I think, just to say well done by everyone that works out there.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Turland.
Well, it says on a permanent basis, so, you know, I think, and hopefully, in the next couple of years, we'll see a better facility constructed out there. So, you know, I don't know if the permanent basis should be where we should be voting at the moment, because it'd probably be a lot more if we actually build something else or go somewhere else, or actually fix up with what we've got there. But at the moment, that facility doesn't comply with occupation and safety health, there's no doubt. And I find it extraordinary that we get to this point now. We know it doesn't, we acknowledge it doesn't, we wouldn't accept it in the private world, but we accept it in the council world. It's not good enough, as far as I'm concerned. I've made that point before in our budgets when we've had extra cash, and all we've done is put it somewhere else. We put it somewhere... Sorry?
I'm just saying that we can't do anything at the moment. It's a lot of money we've got to find.
Well, I see the point that if you have an occupation and safety health issue, you have to do something straight away. You can't turn a blind eye to it. I find that extraordinary that we have 2 levels of standards. It doesn't work like that. If somebody gets injured out there, we're the ones that are going to cop it. Our insurers, if they know that we know it doesn't comply, there's going to be no insurance either in relation back to the person or facility might burn down or whatever it might be. So the permanent basis thing, I think the budget, you're going to lock this in for permanent basis, but I hope within the next 2 years, and I might not be here, Councillor Scander, I might not be here, I don't think I will be. I hope you, whoever takes on the reins, puts some money together and fixes this place.
Yeah, well, the only thing there, Councillor Turland, is that we need $3 to $4 million, and that we know that, and I can only but sympathise with you, as we all do, with the Friends of the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter and the staff. Councillor Scandra.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Turland, for reminding me that you are the Clayton's Deputy Mayor at the moment. You're the Mayor we don't know, the Deputy Mayor that we don't know if we have. And we don't even know if you're leaving in next September of next year. I don't know, he's the mystery man. So anyway, keeps getting the headlines, that's good. Look, outstanding performance by our staff, outstanding performance, and I'm reminded of that, a bit like you, Councillor Halstead, I'm very mindful of animals, and we in fact have all of our domestic pets are rehomed. 2 of them have come from the animal shelter, and so I see those 2. The other one came from Wingelow and was probably on his way to the shelter when we rescued him. So that's where my interest was. I remember being on the steps of this here building early last term, fighting to make sure this facility, which I've never heard...
Councillor Scandrett, can you
I'm looking at my notes here, Mr Mayor.
around a little bit so you're facing this way
Sure,
as
okay, I'll turn my
opposed
notes.
to over there.
Okay,
Now, I'm not going to ask
no.
again.
You don't have to, sir. I'm reading notes here. Anyway, the point I'm making is that that we fought at that time to make sure that this facility continued, to make sure that we had control of it, and to make sure that it was going to be improved. And here we are many years later, it hasn't been improved, and we're on that merry-go-round again. It's the only issue, Mr Mayor, capital capital expenditure issue in this Shire I've never heard one word of complaint about. Throw the money at it tomorrow. They would be so happy. All of the volunteers, the community generally, and so on. And, you know, where can we get that money from? Well, we can get it from Franklin Street if we don't do the housing down there. We can get it from Station Street, $42 million down there. Berrima Deviation, we tossed $4.6 million grant the other day. You're right, Mr Mayor, we don't have the money, despite the fact that, in my opinion, this is probably the top priority project in the Shire because everyone loves it. I mean, we could spend $4 or $5 million on a new facility that had economies of scale in terms of location and security and all of that. There's a number of options in that space, and we would get rid of those poor conditions. The staff and the volunteers freeze out there, as do the animals. We have to spend exorbitant amounts of money heating and cooling animals out there. There's no proper shower, office, meeting room, training room, all those facilities. We were going to put a temporary building there for a few years. That hasn't proceeded. I think that was something I would have liked to have seen as an interim. It would have been an investment of, say, $150,000, not a big deal. But we do have a fantastic set of volunteers out there. The numbers speak for themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Scandra. Councillor Markwart.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I just would like to acknowledge the staff out there. They do a fantastic job, and the volunteers as well. And this reflects the fact that the community some time ago has indicated its support for the facility and the fact that we manage that ourselves. And I return to the purpose of the recommendation, which I think there's been a bit of a drift in the recent debate about that. Council is looking to confirm management of the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter will continue in-house on a permanent basis. I support that, the community supports that, and the staff support that. We can't do anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markwart. Councillor Whipper, your right of reply.
Right of reply. Do you want to say
No,
anything?
I think all I can say is I think every councillor has done two things. They've admitted they have acknowledged the work of the Friends of the Animal Shelter and Wingecarribee, and they've acknowledged the staff and acknowledged that yes, we do have to relocate. $3 to $4 million, that is a challenge. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I thank Councillor Markwart for drawing us back to the motion before us. What we're doing with this debate was preempting the report that will come later on, which provides options. But there's opportunity to, sort of get up there and make a comment. I'm a bit offended by some of the comments that a certain councillor has made in this chamber, because I know that in the last term of council that there was an opportunity and there was a recommendation for looking at relocating this facility and to doing something to bring it up to a modern state, to make it very highly visible, highly accessible, and to provide a better quality of care. That, in my opinion, was cut down. We lost that opportunity, and as a result of that, these animals are suffering. They've been suffering for the last 4 years. That didn't have to happen. We could have had this debate. This could have been budgeted for already, rather than, sort of get up there and say, I feel sorry. Well, some people should feel sorry, I think, councillors, because the animals have been suffering and staff out there have been working under conditions that shouldn't be. Now, I'm looking forward to the debate when that comes forward, but I just had to retort to that because there'll be more said on that, because I think the sooner we move forward and invest money into a better facility for the sake of not only council staff, which is they're at risk out there looking at that dust, there's no doubt about it, but the animals as well. But what we're talking about now is just the management of the facility. So I'll withdraw and go back to the point that we're dealing with. I support it because we know the community spoke very loudly at that time. They were very vocal in terms of wanting council to own responsibility for those animals in our care, and they were very vocal about the fact that they wanted those animals to remain within this shire and to get every opportunity they could to be rehomed and re-established rather than euthanased. So I support the recommendation, and as I said, I really am looking forward to that debate that we're going to have when those options come forward about the animals.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Put the recommendation. All in favour say aye. Aye. Carried. 13.3, page 172, draft Wingecarribee Animal Shelter Alternatives to Euthanasia Policy. Second, move Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Scandrett. Any discussion on this one? No discussion. Put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. We now move over to page 187, Wingecarribee Community Assistance Scheme 2019. Move Councillor Andrews and seconded Councillor Markwart. Is there, before I put it, any discussion? Okay, well, I'm going to say a little bit because I chair it.
I'll say something before you.
Yes, well, you certainly may, Councillor Whipper.
So, Mr Mayor, this process is really embraced by community, we know that. I think there was, what, $800,000 worth of requests that came forward, and we had
240 or something.
I thought it was more than that.
Well, anyway, a lot
we
of
had
money.
130,000 to dispense, and I think that process has been quite professionally handled, and the applications that come in and the recipients of that funding, I think, are truly worthy recipients. I'd like to thank you, Mr Mayor, for chairing that committee as well. It's gone through an exhaustive process. I know that the committees and a lot of councillors, Councillor Andrews has been on some of those committees, Councillor McLaughlin as well, and it's gone through the ringer, and I think we've come up with some very valuable projects that we can assist with.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whipper. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I usually take this opportunity to acknowledge my predecessor, Councillor Phil Yeo, who sat in this seat for about 24 years or something, that actually introduced this, and we've seen this being embraced by the community, and it multiplies the dollars, and it engages the community in all those not-for-profits, all those social sporting facilities in our community. So I think it's well taken up by the community. Obviously, it's oversubscribed, but it's good to see money going back to those community, and it's a great idea that's gone on in perpetuity. So I just acknowledge my former council and former Mayor Phil Yeo. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, and that was, I've been chairing it for 25 years, so that's 4 years, so that's a long time ago he introduced it, but yes, a great scheme. Look, Councillor Whipper's raised the comment that, and I'd like to acknowledge Councillors Markwart, Whipper and Andrews for being on that panel. It goes through the process to sport and rec, arts and culture, and what's the other one? Sport and rec, environment and sustainability. And what has, and then comes back because usually there's a lot more money requested than what's available, and the Community Assistance Committee does the final guillotine. But what is growing is the number of requests for defibrillators, and that's a little bit of a concern. But we've got 3 lots of defibrillators this year. We might put in a community assistance scheme grant for one. So, but yeah, great projects, and congratulations to all those who are going to receive. From skilling up umpires to trestles and tables. So there it is. Put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And they will be distributed during the first week of Local Government Week in August. Local Government Conference. We've had volunteers to attend. Nelson Andrews with Halstead has been the alternate.
Nelson, it's McLaughlin and Andrews.
Oh, I thought it's McLaughlin, Andrews and Halstead as the alternate. Somebody like to move that? Councillors Whipper and Markwart. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Legal report. Somebody like to move the recommendation? Move Councillors Whipper, seconded Councillor Nelson and Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Turner, I'm going to ask about a matter that's got your name on it, so I just want to give you a warning before I speak about that.
No, I'll have to leave the room.
Then you'll have to leave the room if you're being mentioned.
And may I point out something?
Yeah, it's hang on, wait until Councillor Turner leaves the room. Madam General Manager.
I'd like to draw your attention, Councillor, to page 196 of the report, which says that if a councillor has a specific inquiry regarding the costs reported, they should raise it in closed council.
Madam GM, it's not specific, it's just in this report, which is available to everyone in this room and online, and that is that I notice on the matter Mittagong Road Barrel that it's jumped up by some $10,000, yet we were told that the matter was finished.
As I said, Councillor, if you want a specific query on that matter, it should be asked in closed council, as it may require explanation of legal proceedings.
Well, I was told the legal proceedings had been finished.
Okay, any other questions? Then I put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Petition relating subdivision of 40 Sir James Fairfax Drive Circuit. Councillors Scandrett and Markwart. 16.1, page 199, that it be received and noted these petition. This will be coming to council, this one? Mr Wilton, will this yes, I think I might have even called this one up. Okay, put that, who's moved it? You do, Scandrett and Markwart. Put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. 18.1, minutes of the Wingecarribee Floodplain and Risk Management Advisory Committee, 6th of May 2019, page 200. Somebody like to move? Councillors Turland. Can Councillor Markwart put it? All in favour? Against? Carried. We move to page 207, Management and Advisory Committee reports. Move Councillors Halstead, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Minutes of the Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting held Wednesday 15th of May, 18.3, page 208. Move Councillors Whipper and Markwart. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Page 218. Notice of motion, Civic prayer. Councillor Whipper has given notice that it is his intention to move the following motion at the ordinary meeting, 26th of June. Councillor Whipper.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillors, I put this motion forward because and I think the recommendation itself spells out quite clearly how much I value the opening of council in prayer. I think it's important to do that. In fact, we're probably one of the very few councils that still carry out the function of civic prayer. And I find that hard to believe, because if we can't take a moment just to position ourselves and our minds and think of something greater in our community that we can serve than ourselves, I think that's a sad reflection on each of us. This this motion is not designed to in any way infer that there's anything wrong with our Christian prayer. But in this community, I think we would all acknowledge that is becoming much more diverse. Certainly Australia is growing. It's a multicultural community, and people have their own values and their own ways of worship. My own personal belief is that that there is only one force of creation. You can call it by a myriad of names, but the reality is that there's only one source of creation. I take you just to the words of a song that George Harrison actually sang. They call you Christ, Vishnu, Buddha, Jehovah our Lord. They call you Govindam, Bishmullah, creator of all. You are the one, no matter what you are. And I think, that's something that we all have to acknowledge. Now, I don't want to throw the prayer out at all, but I think we should at least make an invitation to people from other belief systems to come along and to share in prayer. The only time in my 20 years of council that we've done this is invited some other faith in to actually address or open the meeting in prayer was the Baha'is back in 2002. And that was a very hard thing to achieve. Unfortunately, at the time, there were some councillors that they were offended by the presence of the Baha'is in the chamber, and they threatened to walk out. Some did, some didn't. Some stayed in here, but I think only because had they left, there wouldn't have been a quorum and there would have been no council meeting. So that was a shame, because there was no malice in that proposal that I put forward as well, to have other religions come along. In fact, I find it interesting, but we don't even have Catholics opening this meeting in prayer. The last time I knew about it, they were certainly Christians. Then we have other faiths as well that are very akin to the Christian line of belief as well. And I think prayer is important. We all worship in some way, whether it's the dollar. In fact, again, songs, Bob Dylan says you've got to serve somebody. It might be the devil or the Lord, but you've got to have to serve somebody. And everybody does. I'm not saying we invite the Satanists in here to worship. I believe in a higher power than that. But councillors, look, I think it's time just to maintain, number one, the opening prayer of council, the civic prayer. I think that's, or the opportunity for prayer at the opening of council, because I believe in all sincerity that's critically important to do, and to extend those invitations. And I may have more to say if I have a right of reply. I know the bell has
Thank
tolled.
you, Councillor.
The bell does not toll for thee.
The bell does toll. The bell does toll. Councillor Mark Walsh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment, which I believe is on the system, and speak to that amendment very briefly. It's a slightly shorter paragraph than Councillor Whipper's. Okay.
Okay.
So I
yes,
think that's clear. I need a second, of course.
Do we have a seconder, Councillor Nelson? Councillor. Well, you've got two seconders, but you only need one. Councillor Nelson.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much. So I thank Councillor Whipper for bringing this issue to Council. I do think it's very worthwhile to have this debate or this discussion. I'd like it to be a discussion more than a debate, but clearly we have to vote on this before we close. The current form of the prayer isn't that inclusive. It doesn't include all the faiths. It doesn't include those who have little faith or no faith, agnostics or atheists, and I include myself in that group. Councillor Whipper's motion seeks to broaden the prayer, which is all good and all excellent, but it doesn't include all members of the community or all members around this table. So, to me, this is a debate or a discussion about inclusiveness. How can we best include as many people as possible in the prayer? In that moment when we actually reflect upon, talk to a higher deity if you like, but we reflect upon why we're here and what we're about. I think it's very important to do that during the... I think it's very important to do that during the council period. So I'm not removing that, but I think we must do it in our own way. Now, 50,000 years ago, we weren't Christian. We only became a Christianish nation a couple hundred years ago. 50,000, to a couple hundred years ago, we were totally non-Christian. So Christianity, while is important today, and probably one of the major religions today, it hasn't been always here. The country has survived without it. And during my term of office, I try to attend as many citizenship ceremonies as I can. And when I come here, I note roughly about half, usually a little less, actually swear on the Bible. About half do an affirmation not on the Bible. This is an indication of this community where it's going in the future. So we must look to the future and we must look to the community. So how do we reflect and how do we grab all that? This country has clear separation between church and state, between the church and the government. That's well known. We have signed a document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And in summary, it says everyone has the right to manifest their own belief system, their own religion and such like. And that's what we should be doing. We should be including everyone. The key word here is everyone. Not just the smaller group, but everyone. Okay, so I believe councillors around this table want everyone in our community and around this table to be included. I thought long and hard about this, how that can be achieved. I made a couple other suggestions, but really cutting to the chase, that motion, or sorry, that amendment, really is the simplest way to do it. Let everyone pray, reflect in their own way in this council chamber. Make it our choice, our individual's choice. That includes everybody, including myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markward. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, well, that was interesting, Mr. Mayor. But interestingly enough, look, I'm happy to support the thrust of this motion. The only question I have, whether, and I do believe, you know, I do understand that we don't get a full spectrum of political people to speak and do the prayer, but I'm just wondering...
Well, it's not actually political.
No, do I say political? I mean religious. Sorry.
Religious, yeah.
Well, they might be political, but anyway, I'm just thinking of, do we get, you know, I mean, I know we've got a Buddhist community here, Hindu community, Jewish community, Muslim community, Baha'i faith. Look, I'm happy, but would we really get people from those faiths to come? And I'm just wondering whether that would really be a reality. But if it is, well, and if it represents the community, I don't see why we wouldn't. I certainly agree with Councillor Whipper saying, why aren't the Catholic Church is coming along? I'd take Councillor Mark, I think it's an interesting concept, whether that, you know, about him, you know, his own personal thoughts about being an atheist and what have you. I dare to say there's not too many atheists in a foxhole, so I've been told, if you're getting shot at. But Councillor Mark might be one. But I'm happy enough to...
Remember, I'll throw a hand grenade your way.
Okay. Well, look, I'm happy to support it, and I think it would certainly make the prayer interesting to hear it, you know. And look, it wasn't that long ago, Mr. Mayor, that we had Welcome to Country, when you think about it. When I first started on this council, I don't think we had Welcome to Country. So I think that was something, and if I can just carry on just for a minute before the bell goes, it's interesting. A good friend of mine, a school friend of mine, got on council in Darwin, of all places. You'll know Greg Jarvis. Greg Jarvis got on council as a Green councillor, as it happens, and on that council, all white fellas, he put up a motion that they have Welcome to Country, and they all looked at him and thought, who is this Green person, you know, putting that up? The Aboriginal population in Darwin is massive, and yet no one did a Welcome to Country, and I think that's amazing. And that was only recently, that relatively recent, it was about 2008, I think he got elected about the same time as me. And he put it up, and he got it up, so it was accepted. And I remember when it came here, it was accepted, and we do it now, and I think it's a good thing to do, and I acknowledge that. So I acknowledge, if we want to have a minute's silence, let's have a minute's silence as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Never get the meeting started. Aren't we lucky we've gone to 3 minutes, Mr. Mayor? Look, I'd like to move a foreshadowed amendment, and that foreshadowed amendment is item 1 and 2 of the motion.
I'll second it from the chair.
I don't think we need a seconder.
Oh, no, not at this stage, you don't. No, you're correct, Mr. Nelson.
Not unless the
Councillor Nelson.
amendment gets defeated. But just a point to clarification with the staff, if the amendment gets up, do we have to amend our code of meeting practice? We don't. Okay.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, when I first looked at this motion, my first thought was that I didn't believe that we really needed a notice of motion to invite these other faiths. But talking to Councillor Whipper and looking at it, the importance of number 1.1 to me is tantamount to what we're talking about here. A couple of minutes that we're used to do take a little bit longer than the minute, but a minute of your time, it cannot be offensive. It's part of our Judeo-Christian system right through our democracy for 1,500 years. We're all these, the four that are mentioned here, and there are many others, by the way, the Latter-day Saints, etc., but they're all united in the same faith. They're all, I believe, or most of them, I believe, are members of the local ministers' fraternal, so they do talk. Some will suggest, I think, that they may not want to come in, but others will. But I cannot emphasise strongly enough, in my opinion, the necessity and the absolute right for the prayer, as it's always been in local government and governments of all kind, to open our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Before your right of reply, yes, I'll be speaking against both at this stage. No. Are you? Yes, you want to speak against the motion?
Basically against Larry's.
Yes. Well, you put yours as amendment, so you can speak against his first.
Okay. Okay, I'd just like to speak briefly against the motion per se, because it's not 100% inclusive. I would consider it if it would include agnostic and atheists within that, and perhaps every three or four meetings have a minute's silence for that, because it's not inclusive of the whole community. I'll give you one example. I attended a recent committee meeting where we talked about some aspects of funding, and I can tell you that half the people there were not supportive at actually putting money into a certain organisation because of some religious context. That is the community speaking. That is what happens out there, and we must remember we're all over 60. The community out there basically have a different view. We must represent that community. We must be inclusive. And I'd just like to talk very briefly on a slight aside about the comment from Councillor McLaughlin and me being down a foxhole. When I was 15 or 16, I was in the Robertson Boy Scouts many years ago, and I resigned from that because they were being somewhat hypocritical. They used to go to the pub when they drove me home after telling me not to drink. I took that very personally. I also had a discussion to them that I didn't believe in God, and they said, on your deathbed you'll be calling out for God. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot close to my deathbed, but I don't do that. I believe what I believe, and I have that right to believe what I believe. And that's why I think to be inclusive, I'm sorry, was that the comment?
No, thank you.
I'm not talking about you.
Thank you.
I believe I have the right to believe what I believe, and we should be inclusive because there are many people out there who are agnostic and are basically atheists out there, and they also have that right. So I think we should reflect that as the leaders of this community and not cut people out. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll be voting against both, and I'll be looking at Councillor Nelson's foreshadowed motion if it gets up. Councillor Andrews raised the point that the Australian Parliament opens with acknowledgement of prayer. The State Parliament opens with an acknowledgement of prayer, and we have as well. And the comment is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I can't see the systems being broken. Councillor Mark Ward raised the point, there is a percentage of the community out there. Well, there is a percentage of the community, and I believe that the Christian community is what this country was founded on, whether you like it or not. But that was what we have founded our constitution on. That is what we've founded our local government on, as well as state and as well as the state. So my grandfather, who was an Anglican minister, would turn over in his grave if he thought that I would be not voting, not supporting a opening with prayer, and I was brought up very much that way, and as such don't see the reason to change. Nobody in the community has written to me. Nobody in the community, as far as I'm aware, has written to the GM or raised it as a public issue. And if it hasn't been raised as a public issue, that I can't see an issue that we stay the status quo. So I will support the 1 and 2. I think that is good enough for this council and should be good enough for, in my opinion, all councils. Councillor Webber.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, it is being raised by the community. It's being raised by the community through me. People do talk to me as well. I know that there are people out there of firm conviction that are not necessarily Christian. I believe this is a Christian community. I'm a Christian, but I can tell you something, that I'm a better Christian because I have an understanding of other philosophies as well. In fact, it took the Hindu religion to make me see what Christianity was all about inclusiveness, about love, about compassion. Like Christ said, love thy neighbour as thyself. Look at Christ, who formed Christianity that we are, as a nation, embedded in. What? They crucified him because he tried to reform things. Come on, think a little bit differently. Love your neighbour. It doesn't matter whether they're Jew, whether they're, Gentile. Let's just love them. Let's just take care of them. That's all this is, councillors. It's nothing more than acknowledging that. And if you want to, spend a minute in silence, let us pray and worship in whatever way you want. But let's make the invitation to those people in our community to come forward and to share in the process of communion. We all serve something. It might be God, it might be the devil, it doesn't matter. So if we want to be really inclusive, we'll invite the pagans in, the Satanists in, those people who worship God as a dog, Let's be serious about this. People and tradition is important. And, people have, they've made connections. Look at some of the great saints in history and how they've suffered for their belief. We're talking about deep devotion and conviction here. I think we have to have respect for that as well. If we pray in whosever name, we can think whatever that is to us. It doesn't matter, as if God cares what we call God. It's like man gives names to all these things. It doesn't really matter. So to have arguments, this is not about division, this is about inclusiveness. I've had a call from a representative from the Ministers Fraternal who may have opposed this some time ago, but he said he understood this is about inclusiveness. And what they were concerned about was that there are those in this community that want to get rid of the civic prayer. That's dangerous, because I think if we don't base ourselves on some sort of morality and values, it becomes a jungle. So councillors, all I'm asking is the courtesy of that Christian kindness to invite people here to share in the process and to represent other belief systems in this community. At the end of the day, it's the same belief, there's no doubt, I don't think any God keeps score when we're face to face with the Almighty, no matter what you call he or she. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. The
does
bell
toll for
tolls
me.
again. All right. I will put the amendment first. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. The amendment, that's Councillor Markward.
1 minute silence.
Yes, I'm voting for that way. All those in favour of the amendment? You want me to tell you how the system will work?
Hang on, I'm just, which amendment, not the foreshadow?
No, you vote for the amendment. Initially you can vote for the amendment, then you can change your vote. I'm voting for the amendment. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Markwart, McLaughlin and Gare. All those in favour of the motion? All those in favour of the motion?
All against the amendment.
Against the amendment. Well, in favour, Councillors Turland, Andrews, Whipper and Halstead. I declare the amendment becomes the motion. Now we have a foreshadowed...
You can't, because you only have if the amendment is defeated.
Pardon? There was a foreshadowed motion that was to come forward.
That can only happen if the
And
amendment,
now,
if the amendment is lost, the foreshadowed amendment can come up, but the amendment has gone up. So
All
there
right.
is no foreshadowing. So you now have to put the motion, which is the amendment.
okay, then I put then you can vote against the whole thing. I put the motion. All those in favour of the motion. The amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour of the motion, raise your hand. Councillors Nelson, Markwart and McLaughlin. The motion is lost. No, we have nothing. So we now knew the votes. Right? So there is
Hang on, let's get this right.
Those against the motion. Can call for those against the motion.
those for against the motion. We have put the amendment has become the motion.
It shouldn't be.
What?
For the moment.
For the moment. And now the motion is, I put the motion. And the motion is Councillor Markwart. So now I'm putting the motion, all in favour of the motion.
Which is the 1 minute silence.
Yes.
Which is the 1 minute silence. No, the amendment... Okay, we'll go back to the beginning.
Can I explain it?
Yes, because there will be a nothing vote.
Can I try to clarify the situation? There was the motion which was moved by Councillor Whipper and seconded by Councillor Turland, which was... Yes, yes.
Yes.
Please, I'm trying to explain it.
And then... go on.
And that was numbers 1 to 6. There was an amendment put forward by Councillor Markwart and seconded by Councillor Nelson. No. Okay, McLaughlin, sorry. My apologies. And this was the one about a 1 minute silence without going into the detail. So the amendment was put. The amendment got up. The amendment then became the motion. The motion was put and lost.
There is nothing.
So, there's nothing. So we can now look at the foreshadowed motion, which was foreshadowed by Councillor Nelson, which was, if I remember rightly, 1 and 2. So,
Okay, so you now moving 1 and 2. Okay, then you got to see it as seconder. I'll second it from the chair. So we now have the foreshadowed motion. There is no other motion. It is now the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. At point 1 and 2. Then the status quo prevails. So, all in favour of the motion. I'll ask again to get everybody clear. All in favour of the motion. then the motion, all against the, 3, councillors Nelson, McLaughlin and Gare, all against the motion. I declare the motion lost. We now have nothing. We stay the status quo. Now, there you go. Sometimes you work. That's right, to get back to the emotion. I'd like somebody to move recommendation that we go into closed committee. Move Councillor Nelson, seconded Councillor Markwart. Put that recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. Those against, that one's carried. We now go into closed. Thank you, members of the public, for that inaugural, auspicious, live streaming. I'm sorry. No, I didn't. I knew exactly what I was doing.